The Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, has reacted to a Premium Times report detailing how her ministry illegally approved N10 billion for the National Assembly. The report, published on Friday, indicated that Mrs Adeosun released the billions to the lawmakers despite the N125 billion appropriated for the federal legislature in the 2017 fiscal year for recurrent and capital expenditures. The fund was arbitrarily approved for the lawmakers by the minister in collusion with the Accountant General of the Federation, Mrs Adeosun. Investigations by Premium Times also showed that at least 44 of the 82 contractors the leadership of the National Assembly claimed they were owing were not registered on the National Database of Contractors, a database of the Bureau of Public Procurement, BPP. That means they are not eligible to be awarded federal contracts. A further check by this newspaper revealed that 17 of the 44 firms were not even registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC. In a statement by her media aide, N10, Friday evening, the minister confirmed releasing the fund, but said her action remained legal. Describing Premium Times reports as defective, Mrs Adeosun claimed that warrants were issued before the billions were moved to the lawmakers. The attention of the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mrs Kemi Adeosun, has been drawn to a smear campaign by an online medium, Premium Times, of illegally sharing of N10 billion from the National Treasury. The Honorable Minister wishes to debunk the entire mischievous and made-up report of the online medium which negates the ethics and professionalism of journalism. The article displays a worrying lack of understanding of appropriation, payments and control, and therefore be disregarded by the public. The minister further wishes to state that warrants are issued in accordance with appropriation and after due approval by the Cash Plan Committee chaired by the minister. The statement however failed to explain the process of approval for such warrant. The minister did not also address salient issues such as the release of funds outside the budget and award of contracts to unqualified companies. Mrs Adeosun did not also explain why she failed to conduct further due diligence by asking for evidence that the contracts were duly awarded before she approved the funds for the lawmakers. Another explanation the minister failed to make is why her ministry preferred to give N10 billion of the N20 billion allocated for the payments of federal contractors to the National Assembly, which has a budget that covers all its recurrent and capital spendings. Saraki threatens lawsuit over report on alleged N10 billion fraud. Rattled by our report that the National Assembly under his leadership illegally received N10 billion from the Treasury, the President of the Senate, Saraki, has threatened to sue Premium Times over the publication. The story entitled, Exclusive, Minister Adeosun, Saraki, Dogaro, Accountant General in N10 billion fraud scandal, unearthed the irregularities in the receipt and disbursement of the fund. The report, published on Friday, indicated the billions were released to the lawmakers despite the N125 billion appropriated for the federal legislature in the 2017 fiscal year for recurrent and capital expenditures. The fund was arbitrarily approved for the lawmakers by the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, in collusion with the Accountant General of the Federation, Mrs Adeosun, the report said. Investigations by Premium Times also showed that at least 44 of the 82 contractors Messrs Saraki and Dogari claimed they were owing were not registered on the National Database of Contractors, a database of the Bureau of Public Procurement, BPP. That means they are not eligible to be awarded federal contracts. A further check by this newspaper revealed that 17 of the 44 firms were not even registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC. But rather than respond to the substantive issues raised in the report, Mr. Saraki is claiming that he cannot be held liable for how funds are dispersed to the National Assembly and how they are spent. He is arguing that the top civil servants in the legislature are those that should be made to render accounts. It did not matter to the Senate President that he is the chairman of the National Assembly, and that the bucks largely stop at his table. In a statement by his special advisor on media and publicity, Yusuf Olaniyi, the senator challenged the facts presented by Premium Times, saying they were incorrect. Mr. Saraki announced that he would initiate legal action on the matter. Read the full statement below. Premium Times should have known better. Response to false publication from online platform. Again, our attention has been drawn to a publication by Premium Times which unethically alleges without any proof, reference, attribution or justification that the Senate President, Dr. Abubakar Kolas Saraki, was involved in receiving or sharing any unauthorized funds. The article, entitled Exclusive, Minister Adeosun, Saraki, Dogaro, Accountant General in N10 billion fraud scandal, in both its style, substance, and deliberate spin struggles to connect the Senate President to the receipt and apportioning of funds which the publication describes as illegal. In the absence of any doubt, the Senate President has nothing to do with any payment, receipt or disbursement of any extra budgetary funds. It is also important to state for the record that the Premium Times article in question is pure and unmitigated false news. A simple check by Premium Times would have revealed that all funds in the National Assembly are in the custody of the National Assembly management, which is headed by the clerk, and not its presiding officers. Additionally, all contract awards are equally overseen by the National Assembly management, not the presiding officers. We are aware that for some weeks now, Premium Times has had this story. However, they only contacted us on Wednesday, and the clerk of the National Assembly, after a phone call from the special advisor on media and publicity to the Senate President, promised to give them all necessary explanation and documents on this issue. However, it is obvious that in the bid to rope in Senator Saraki, the reporters of Premium Times could not wait to see the clerk and rushed to publish the story with outright falsehood less than 24 hours after the clerk made the aforementioned promise. We are surprised that without any proof whatsoever, Premium Times was using expressions like, Senate President Kolas Saraki and Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogaro, have just illegally received and shared, Saraki and Dogara submitted, and investigations by Premium Times showed that at least 44 of the 82 contractors Messrs. Saraki and Dogara, and these are highly defamatory and careless expressions. It is expected that the editors of Premium Times will not be ignorant of the internal procurement and payment process in an organization like the National Assembly that they have covered and investigated for as long as they, Premium Times, has been in existence. We consider this as part of the orchestrated campaign of calumny being waged against Dr. Saraki by some political elements using media platforms in which they have interests. In this regard, for this careless and unwarranted assault on the person of the Senate President after several previous warnings, the lawyers of the Senate President, Dr. Abubakar Kolas Saraki, will be initiating legal action on this particular matter. Finally, we ask the public to disregard the Premium Times piece, and take it for what it is, and will continue to be, fake news. Signed, Special Advisor on Media and Publicity to the President of the Senate.